with Twisted Hobbies, and today we're building the Crak Yak.
Okay, let's get started with a build of the Crak Yak. First and most importantly, I have my manual. This manual applies to 6 different planes that they have, all their 32-inch size planes, and there's some differences, but for the most part, this is what you need. So I'm going to be following the manual. In addition to that, I've got my plane, I've got my receiver, I have my ESC, I have my motor, I have my servos, and I have some adhesives. As always, I've got CA glue, I've got my trusty foam tack. I'm also trying out some new glue that Twisted Hobbies sent me, and that's some Jingxia JQ2118. First thing I'm going to do is take everything out of the box, make sure it's all there, and then I'm going to fold over all my surfaces and weigh them down for a couple hours. While that's going on, I'm going to take the opportunity to set up my electronics. So I get out my transmitter, I'm going to bind my receiver, calibrate my ESC, center my servos, and verify motor direction. I have a detailed video on this in the description if you'd like to check out that link. Next up, we're going to be gluing the wings to the horizontal fuselage. And for this, I'm going to put adhesive onto the wings and then just push them into the body. I am doing this on top of a piece of parchment paper. That is definitely required. You don't want to end up gluing this to the table. So I get those pressed together. You can also pull these back apart a little bit and let them tack up before you push them into the horizontal fuselage. Either way works. Now I'm prepping the slot for the wing spar. So I have to cut out a little piece of foam on each side where it comes together. I do a dry fit to make sure everything works, and I needed a little bit more room at the edges, so I just cut a little bit more room. Dry fit looks great. Now I'm going to get glue on both sides, spread it out nice and even, and then get it into our slot. Once it's in place, we're going to put some batteries on top of it to make sure that it dries while flat. While that's drying, we're going to attach the elevator to the horizontal fuselage, and I just put my adhesive on there, put it together, and then you're going to see me measure it quite a few times from wingtip to tail tip on each side, making sure everything is all even. And next we're going to be installing the elevator servo. Just get that glued into place. And then we're going to be working on the vertical fuselage, just the bottom part. And you'll see here I put adhesive all the way down. A little bit on the tabs, you don't have to, but I like a little bit of extra. And then the most important part here is to make sure it's all square. I got this little square from Twisted Hobbies, and it is perfect for making sure everything is set. Next we're going to go onto the fuselage stiffeners, and you'll notice the manual says not to put any glue the first 80 millimeters, and that is correct. You want to be able to run the wires through there and have a little flap and then glue it later. But on the side without the wires, you can run glue all the way up it. I just try and keep it at a 45-degree angle, and then we're going to do the other side exactly the same. And once again, I'm going to use my square to check and make sure everything's square. Next, we're going to move on to the servo horn extensions. So I go for my hardware bag, and these are the pieces we're going to be using. I'm just going to cut them out, get them all free, trim them up as needed, and then we're going to start on the differential horn for the ailerons. There's a couple different ways. I was going to start by using a screw and just attach it using a screw, but I found that the holes didn't line up, so I'd have to drill a new hole, and I just figured I might as well attach my differential horn using CA and some thread. So I've got it set just a little bit, and then I go back over it with some thread. I do maybe 10 times around on each side. Once I get it all wrapped around, I'll hit it with some kicker, go to the other side, and then saturate those. And this is probably a good time to mention, if you are putting together the Crak Yak or any of the other models that use the servo extensions, they are located right there. I initially did not put my servo extensions on, and this is where it should have happened before this step. The manual doesn't say to do it, it just leaves this part out, but if your model came with extensions, I would recommend installing them. And here you see me finishing the install for the end links on the differential horn, and then we're going to be installing the servo and the differential horn onto the plane. Careful as you press your differential horn onto the servo, you don't want to break off the extension. Next up, we're going to dry fit the Aileron control horns, and I had to open those up a little bit to get them down flush with the EPP. Once they were good, I was able to put some adhesive on them and get them into place. Then we'll shift our focus to the Aileron pushrods. I'm going to need some of these snap-in end links, and we're going to use the CA glue and heat shrink to get those into place. Be careful if you're using an open flame to do these. If you heat them too much, you can actually melt the plastic. Then we're ready to install the Aileron pushrods, and they just go through the adjustable end links and then the snap-in links. Then for the landing gear, we're going to use a 2mm drill bit. There's a little marking for the slot. I open that up, and then we're going to put on the fuselage reinforcements. And then we're going to assemble the wheel pants and wheel assemblies. I start with drilling out the wheels, again with a 2mm, I think it's 5/64. And then when you assemble the wheel pants, make sure you have a left side and a right side. And they all just sandwich together and make an even edge. Here's a little diagram for how the wheel assemblies go together. And once we get those wheel assemblies all together and mounted, we're going to use these wheel pants as well. Next up, I'm going to put the pushrod on for the elevator, and I just use a little piece of bamboo skewer to touch each of those. And now we're ready to install our rudder servo, and at this point I would also recommend straying from the manual and actually put your servo horn onto there as well. And now we're ready to finish the vertical fuselage, and I like to lay that down next to it so that way you can see exactly where it needs to go, get it pushed together, and then make sure and use your square because you want everything nice and accurate. Now for the rudder, I like to elevate the back of the plane, and you'll see that I put the adhesive on, I let it tack up for a minute or two, and then I was able to press it together, and it's a near instant bond. Next, you'll see me needlessly struggle with a servo horn that I should have put on before I put that part of the vertical fuselage into place. And then we just want to go back and make sure everything is drying all square. And now I'm going to put in a tail skid. I trimmed off a little piece of the elevator pushrod, and I'm just using that to be able to elevate my rudder off the ground. And now I'm installing the control horn for the rudder. I did need to open it up a little bit more with the X-Acto blade. And now I'm installing the pushrod for the rudder as well. So I get all those standoffs into their holes, snap together the snap link, and then next up is going to be the motor mount. I'm going to scuff it up a little bit, and I don't like the yellow, so I went and painted mine. Mine's black now, and you just put some adhesive on there, get it centered, and then it's good to go. Now we're going to work on the side force generators. You just do a slit down the middle of these, they open up and then squish into place. The smaller one goes towards the outside, and I just give them a tiny bit of glue. Now we are almost finished. I'm going to install the motor and the electronics. I'm going to stuff all these wires down into the little channel. And then we're going to glue that all together. Don't forget to glue up the other side while you're at it. And then I'm ready to permanently mount the receiver. Now I'm ready to balance my prop with my little prop balancer I got from Twisted Hobbies. Just use a little piece of tape, make it balance. Good to go. If you've never used a prop balancer, it makes a night and day difference. I wouldn't fly a plane without doing one. Then I use my O-ring installer tool, get my prop on there, and then just some little finishing touches. I think my servo was a little loose, so I added a little glue in there. And now we're ready to check the center of gravity so I can place my battery in the correct position. I mark it at 210 millimeters, which is what they recommend for the Crak Yak. And then I put my battery on, balanced it. Man, that seems great. So this is the very first maiden flight with this plane. You can see it's porpoising a little bit. It's a little bit nose heavy. I'll have to move the battery a little bit more after this, but I'm just checking to see where, how it feels, how it flies, looking for making sure that it's flying true, so it's not going off to the left or right or trying to roll in one direction or another. When I do my pre-flight, I make sure everything is centered and make sure everything goes the direction I want it to go, because nobody likes when they have their ailerons reversed or something like that. But now I'm just sort of playing around with it, and I'll play around with it for the next few minutes, just trying to see where its flight envelope is, what it's able to do, what feels good with it, how it does inverted, how it tracks, which way does it go when I really give it the beans. Now originally I did have this set up without the servo extensions on the elevator and the rudder, so this is kind of with low rates. I did go ahead and put those on, and I really liked the feel. It really livened it up quite a bit. I typically fly with max available throw and have my expo set to about 65-70%, depending on the model. I know that's a lot for some people, but for the way that I fly, that's what works for me. Okay, since this first initial flight, I believe I've done about 30 more flights with it, and I can tell already that this plane is going to make me a better pilot. It is just able to do anything I think about it. Every time I fly it, I wreck it 2 or 3 times because I'm trying to push my abilities with it. So I hope that this build video helped you, and I hope you enjoy your Crak Yak as much as I do. Okay, let's talk about the JQ2118 that Twisted Hobbies sent me. I'm really glad that they're offering a budget adhesive, and it worked. The one thing that I really didn't like about it is that it was messy. If I have to choose between this and foam tack, I'm going with the foam tack. I really love the applicator tip on here because you're really able to use fine control and get it exactly where you need it to go. Foam tack's going to be my choice for doing models, but I am glad that they have a budget alternative as well with JQ2118.